We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
The warmer from the hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Soups with myself, Greg Oops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16. We're going to chat it up with him about all that we are currently seeing with LSU. My goodness gracious, it is a ton that we are seeing with LSU. How good can this team be? Will they actually have any of these guys be eligible whatsoever? What has all been happening with that? So we're going to have to dive in there. We still have some big impactful NBA draft decisions. Malachi Moreno, Dalen Swain. So we're going to be chatting about that with him as well. And then in the final segment, I'm going to get you guys a recap of the news and notes we saw in college basketball on Thursday outside of LSU, because I will lead with LSU once again. They signed another international man of mystery. So LSU is certainly on a run there. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Soups, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast. And if you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, largely, I'm name does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I do beg with you, I do plead with you, please do send these into the Twitter/X timeline, because I really do want to be answering some of these. It helps the offseason go by a little bit more smoothly. But how about this for LSU? Now, Michael Ruzek, he was the international man of mystery that signed with LSU on Wednesday, and there should be no qualms with him. He was 19 years old, play a little bit internationally. He's got a little bit of versatility, if I'm not mistaken. He's from the country of Croatia. He played in La Liga ACB over in Spain over the last few seasons, and he was averaging about 6.5 points per game, was actually about a 40% three-point shooter, so he's good enough to stretch a floor. Age 19, was not drafted by any team. I think that he was going through the NBA process. I know that there were some teams that were looking at him, but he never got drafted with any team or anything like that, so this is one that should be on the up and up for LSU, so yay, verily there. Still going to be very interesting to see what happens with this roster, though, because you take a look around at what LSU currently has on the roster, and R.J. Lewis is going to need a waiver. Yam Madar, he's currently 25 years old. If the 5-5 rule passes, he will be not able to participate. Bryce Desert, he comes over from the EuroLeague. Marcio Santos from the EuroLeague. Mo Diabate should be good. He comes over from Kentucky. Austin Nunez from UTSA. Meet the Roadrunners. Abdi Bashir, Divine Okachuo. You've got a few guys that should be all good to go here. Bashir is a guy that I actually think has quite a bit of upside for Kansas State, and it's very clear that with Will Wade, he's looking at a lot of guys who are able to pop it and lock it from 3. Even Santos, who comes over from the EuroLeague, he should be one of those guys as well. Lots of question marks, though, because, again, if that 5-5 rule passes, LSU may not have too much of a roster. We know that they've got Mo Diabate and Abdi Bashir. That's great, but what else they're going to have outside that, nobody knows. But Michael Ruzek, he should be all good to go, so congratulations to LSU. They signed a 19-year-old international man of mystery, and they have very much been going Euro tripping here in the offseason, and we're going to stay in the States for this one. We go out to SEC country, where we find our good friend Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16. He joins me next right here on Coast to Coast Soups with myself, Greg Oops Peters, and now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops and now part of the VSiN family podcast. It's always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Blake Lovell aboard. He does such great work over at Southeastern 16, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. He does such a great job on so many different fronts, and on top of the SEC, which is obviously his main specialty, he does a great job taking a look at the national landscape as well. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell. That last name is spelled Lovell. And Blake, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks always for having me, Greg.
It is always a pleasure, my friend. And boy, we've got something to talk about with LSU. We've talked about them a few times, and I brought up on this podcast, hey, it feels like they're off to a slow start. When are we going to start to see some roster building from LSU? Well, they seem to have built a roster. We don't know if they're going to have eligibility for too many of these guys, but they have built a roster. I just want to get your thoughts, because from RJ Lewis to Yam Mater, list goes on and on. They're trying to bring in a lot of guys that are going to need a specialty waiver and or a court case, and it's a wild time to be a fan, ally, enemy, what have you, of LSU basketball.
Yeah, I mean, when we knew that Bill Wade was coming back, we should have known that there was going to be a little bit something extra. Bill, I think, to certainly, I've said this whole thing, I'm like, it is straight up middle finger, NCAA, here you go. Like, it is, I think I've seen that pretty much in every decision they're making right now. And that's simply what they're trying to do is, you know, when you look at, I think, the nature of what they thought they could do. And I mean, look, it just goes beyond Will Wade, right? I mean, they hired Rick Stansbury to join the staff. You know, Johnny Jones is on the staff. Like, these are guys that say what you want about them as head coaches. They know how to get players. And when you combine those three guys specifically together, we shouldn't have been surprised that there were going to be some very unique moves being made. And I think if you remember back, the whole discussion for like 6 months, if you go back to the LSU football coaching situation, and then people were debating, you know, when LSU's basketball season was not going well in January or so, are they going to make a move here? Can they actually make a move? Do they have any money? And it's like, what a silly idea that was now when you're like, does LSU have any money? Well, look how much they're paying each of these guys that could be on their roster. Who knows? And again, I have no idea what to even make of trying to project what they're going to be, because you don't know who's going to be playing and who isn't. But what we do know is that LSU has something in mind, and they are just going all in and basically daring the NCAA to do something about it. And we wait, as usual.
Absolutely. And we saw John Rothstein on Wednesday tweet out, hey, LSU and Houston has agreed to a matchup. And my only question was the Houston Cougars or the Houston Rockets. Like, that's exactly right. What I was thinking, because
which Houston team? So it could be any of them at this point. So,
oh, man. I mean, if they actually get this formed, where do we place them in the SEC? Because if you bring in the Big East Player of the Year, multiple NBA draft picks, they have to be like a top 4 team. I have no idea how this all comes together, but sheer talent and talent alone, this is a great team. But we just don't know if any of that talent is going to be out there on the floor whatsoever.
Right. This is the ultimate wait as long as you possibly can to have a thought on what LSU is going to be next season, because as of right now, there's just absolutely no clarity, and there's no way to project what's going to happen. I mean, it was like we looked at this roster and people were kind of panicking. It's like, well, there's Mo Diabate and that's it. And that's really all we had to go on.
People.
Well, right. And now, but it's like we've added all these other players and it still kind of feels like it's Mo Diabate and that's about it. Like that's all we know at this point. And so, they have a few other players that, yes, I think will be fine with eligibility that they're going to bring in. But a lot of these players that are probably seen as significant additions, you just can't just yet. Like, I don't think you can have that confidence. But clearly, I will say that I don't know if LSU's doing this without having some pretty significant confidence in what they think they're going to be able to do. And of course, that always leads us to the L word, lawsuits, because that's the theme of college sports these days. And you feel like they are confident enough in letting this play out. And I'll tell you, if this were to play out and LSU have a lot of these players available next season, at what point, are you going to look up and be like, well, guess what? LSU's not going to be the only team that's going to do this. Other teams are going to start saying, okay, can we field pro teams? Because if we can, then why should I not go out and try to put together a professional basketball team that plays in the SEC or another power conference? Easier said than done, but LSU has the money apparently, and they are putting it into it and saying, we're going to give it a shot. And if these guys aren't eligible, then we got a lot of money left and we'll just go out and find whoever else is left.
Oh man, this is just so interesting to say the least. And I give them credit. They're going to be going for it. And if this actually works out, they have built themselves one heck of a roster, as we do have our good friend Blake Lovell of Southeastern 16 joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And how much do you think that this could press the NCAA to pass through that 5-5 rule? Because I think that that's a big key here, because a lot of these guys are going to be absolutely ineligible if that 5-5 rule passes. And I think that that is really the big key in what we're seeing right now, because it feels like what LSU is doing is forcing the hand of the NCAA to try to be able to pass through something before the start of the season, or even at the start of June, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what they're trying to do. And then that's, again, I mean, it's like, who would have thought that Will Wade would be the person that would maybe try to put a little pressure on the NCAA? I don't think that's necessarily a shocker. And, I think, too, it's interesting to think about, like, when did he have this in mind of, I mean, again, we talked about it, Greg, not long ago. We're like, there were rumors of this reunion happening like months into the season, like not that long. Like, it's like, okay, this could actually happen if both their seasons keep going this way. Don't be surprised if he winds up back in Baton Rouge. And that's my thing, is like, they've done their homework here in terms of saying, okay, we understand that this is a possibility, and you better believe they went into all the possible rules scenarios that there were, because it's like, he didn't get the job that late. And that's where you have to remember, sometimes when guys get in this point are like, we don't have another choice. Like, this is the only way we can build our roster. But for LSU, they had time to go out and get some of these top transfers, which they still could get depending on some of these NBA draft decisions. So I think they're absolutely just saying, we are going to put as much pressure and we are going to dare them, because then it gets down to the legal stuff, which, as you know, can take a while to play out. And so you feel like it's one where, what are they going to do, right? They're going to strip us of our wins after we go to the Final Four? Who cares? I mean, it's like, is that really going to hurt them all that much? No. People will still be excited about LSU basketball if they finish one of the top 3 teams in the SEC, which they probably would be right now if you're projecting the roster they currently have with all the guys and saying, best case scenario, everyone plays. Of course, they're going to be a top team in the SEC because they have some pro players on their roster that are really, really good and could be, SEC player of the year type candidates potentially. That's where we are. And like you said, it's really just about the pressure that's being put on, and that clock starts ticking now, I think, for the NCAA. And basically it's the NCAA versus LSU, and it's kind of LSU versus the world at this point.
Oh man, we've got ourselves some fun when it comes to LSU, as Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And the fun part is there's still 15 other teams out there in the SEC that we have not talked about, and we're like 8 minutes through this conversation. And just how do you take a look at the rest of the SEC? Because I think Kentucky is just in such an interesting spot right now, because it's not a trade secret that these guys are very much hoping that Milan Mimicevic pulls out of the NBA draft and that they're going to be able to land him. But now Malachi Moreno is very 50-50 on the draft as well. And the big 2 question marks that we had in our last conversation about a week or so ago was the rosters of Kentucky and the rosters of LSU. The trade secrets of LSU are now out. I still feel like we need to learn a little bit more about Kentucky, because they've got so many great role players, but we know that Kentucky is still sitting on some money themselves, and that they are still looking for that star player.
Yeah, and I think that's where, this can go one of 2 ways for Mark Pope. if they come out and this is the roster they have going into next season, minus maybe, another pickup somewhere that's fine, but not sort of a game-changing addition. Again, we talked about it, I think, the last time. Like, they are at best, to me, the 6th or 7th best team in the SEC at that point.
And that's
they're not and I was going to say, and that's about as easy as it gets to say that is your best possible outcome, because I don't think they have the roster that compete with the top 5 by any means. But if they were to land Milan from Iowa State, all of a sudden he joins the roster, and let's say Moreno comes back, well, then you are looking at a roster, I think, that all of a sudden is going to make a push into that top tier. I still wouldn't put them ahead of, Florida or Tennessee or Texas, probably maybe even Arkansas, but they're more in that discussion than they are right now. And, then you may be looking at 5 SEC teams that feel like top 20 teams to start the season or something like that. But like you mentioned, I think the Moreno thing feels like it has gone way more towards the 50-50 than whereas initially it's like, yeah, he's going to come back. These are the 2 big dominoes that I think that have to fall for Kentucky. And you want to talk about worst case scenario, Greg. Let's say Moreno goes to the draft, comes down to maybe Kentucky and Louisville for the sharpshooter, the star player. And if he goes to Louisville, look out. Because the pressure that would be on Kentucky is already high. But if that's the case and you miss out on another one of these top guys, man, there is just a lot of questions that are going to be had going into the season. But I do kind of think Kentucky feels like they have a lot of momentum in that sweepstakes. So if they could get the double, good news here, then all of a sudden we're going to certainly change our expectations on what they can be.
Absolutely. I think that's a big decision for them, as Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I feel like there's one team that personally I feel like I haven't talked about enough from the SEC on this podcast, and they deserve to be talked about right now. That'd be Texas, because I do love what they've been able to do here in the offseason. Obviously, the backcourt is going to be looking a little bit new with guys running out of eligibility, but I feel like they've done a great job here in the offseason in terms of improving a defense. I think that's fair to say. It was a little bit, shall we say, lackadaisical this past season. I think that it's going to be much better this upcoming season. Then additionally with this Texas team, I think that it's interesting that it feels like it's a little bit more 50-50 than some people think on Dalen Swain coming back. How do you take a look at that ordeal? Because if they get Swain back, I think we are looking at a team that could be in for a really, really big season.
Yeah, I mean, if that were to happen, then I think, Texas is probably, and I don't think this is going too far, I think they would be right there with Florida as potentially 1A and 1B. And I know some Florida fans may push back on that, but Texas would have one of the most complete rosters in the country. May still keep Florida ahead of them, but man, it is certainly something where if they were to add him back into the mix, that would be pretty substantial. Even if they don't, I think this is a top 12 probably team at worst heading into the year because of all the additions we've talked about this offseason, whether it's David Punch coming in, obviously Isaiah Johnson, what those two are going to bring to the table. You've got high upside former SEC players in Amari Evans, Elijah Freeman. Look at the bench where you're bringing in a star freshman in Austin Gooseby. You got Mikey Lewis there. So it's just like they've got size, they've got depth, and then the one guy I haven't mentioned, Matas Voki-Titus, is an SEC Player of the Year candidate. And so he will probably be the most dominant big man in the SEC if Ruben Chinyelu doesn't come back. And so Texas would have the complete package to me. They would have the scoring, they'd have the defensive ability, they'd kind of have those it-type players in the front court, I think, that you need to win in this era. Yeah, right now I'd consider Texas one of the top SEC title contenders, and they feel like a team that kind of has all the tools they need to make a deep run come next March.
Yep, no question about it. I think that they have done a great job here in the offseason. And then just looking at things right now, because there's a lot of question mark with Vanderbilt. I feel like Tyler Tanner, that's obviously such a big decision. But is there one team in the SEC that could be sitting there in the middle/bottom that you feel like maybe has had a little bit of a better offseason than a lot of people might think, and perhaps their moves are getting lost in what the likes of Tennessee have done, what the likes of Florida have done, what have you, that could be able to surprise at this point?
Yeah, I think, teams in the middle of the pack probably right now. I don't know where exactly we'd put Auburn, but I think Auburn has done a lot of good work this offseason. I think they've really upgraded in a lot of different areas. And you remember last year, the whole theme with Auburn, they're going to score. Their defense is not very good. And to be completely honest with you, I don't know how much better their defense is going to be. It may not be that much better. I think it'll be better, but I don't know how much better they're going to be defensively. But their offense was about close to a top 10 offensive team last year. I think that's probably the floor for them this year. When you look at kind of the pieces that they have in place on this particular roster, getting Todd Pettiford back, giving Kevin Overton back. And then you look at kind of the guys they've added to the mix, whether it's, Rebstovicius, the international they just signed. They've got Adam Olsen coming in. Their shooting is going to, I think, be a pretty big equalizer and something where they're going to have a big advantage over a lot of SEC teams, I feel like, with the roster they put together. And so they were a team that certainly has leaned in on the size idea. You've got some big guys that can shoot the ball. You've got some bigger, type guys on the wing. And so I think Auburn is a team right now, and this is where it comes down to how successful can they be? Well, it's all a matter of what you think Stephen Pearl can do with this team for an entire season. So I think Auburn maybe not going to be, Final Four-esque the way they were for many years during the Bruce Pearl era, but I think Auburn is on the way back here. And, I feel like they put together a much better roster. And so to me, that would probably be the leading candidate. The other team I'll mention, not because I think that they are going to necessarily, be a team that even finishes outside of the bottom four, but I think South Carolina, with what they have to work with, has at least done some good things. And I think, again, maybe getting some good news on the international front, perhaps. They've added some players to the mix that I think are intriguing. They've got some SEC, type flavor with a couple of these guys, Cam Heide, Davion Hannah, having a chance to break out. Again, I think it's going to be tough for South Carolina because I think they are probably, from an NIL standpoint, really up against it compared to most of these SEC teams. But I would not sleep on them as a possible team that's not even going to have a chance at winning the title, but maybe being a team that's going to be a little better than people think if some of these guys can come together and they can still add a few more pieces, which I think, at least from what I've heard, that they seem to have some positive momentum towards doing that.
Yep, absolutely. I've liked what South Carolina has been able to do this offseason as well. Certainly, they're just fighting an uphill battle with some of these teams. Looking at you, LSU, they're spending so much money and have professionals. But you know what? I like what they've been able to do as well. And I always love what I'm able to do on this podcast when I'm able to get you aboard, Blake, because you're doing such a great job looking at this wonderful sport of college basketball. You're dialed into a little bit of everything. And I know that you're having some good, clean family fun looking at what we're seeing with LSU as well. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media to other platforms.
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, check out all of our SEC stuff over at Southeastern 16. Of course, we've got lots of off-season stuff following all these transfers, and we have expanded to do more college basketball stuff on a national level. So check out all of our weekly stuff there. And yeah, everything else, follow me on Twitter/X at @TheBlakeLovell.
And Blake is doing such an incredible job looking at this great sport of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. He did so once again today. So big thanks to Blake for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes we saw in college basketball the last 24 hours.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always a pleasure to be joined by Blake Lovell. He's doing such amazing work over at Southeastern 16. Boy, we've got a lot to look at with LSU in the coming days and coming weeks. He's doing a great job on that front and so much more. And every single time he joins me, he lends such great insight. So a big thanks to Mr. Blake for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. And I think that this one is very interesting with the fact that Miles Thompson is going to be heading on over to South Dakota State. I really liked him before going down with an injury over at SIU Edwardsville last season. He's a 6'7", little bit of a combo player that is able to do just a lot of mixing and matching in general. He's going to be able to give this team some rebounding. He was averaging 6 boards, 10.5 points per game in his small sample size. His career about 30% three-point shooter, not necessarily his forte, but he really worked on that in his full 2024-25 season coming in off the bench. He's able to give you about a half a block per contest as well. And I think that this is a really good add for a South Dakota State team that it was obviously a down year without having Coach Henderson in the fold. And when South Dakota State has really been going well, they've been able to do a nice job on the defensive glass. SIU Edwardsville was one of the better teams in all of college basketball last year with regards to their defensive rebounding. I do think that he's going to be able to do a nice job in terms of being able to fill that void. Now, for South Dakota State, as we know, when this team has been at full force as well, they have also been a really good three-point shooting team, and we just frankly haven't seen a lot of moves out of South Dakota State here in the offseason. They've been signing a lot more of the non-Division I guys other than Thompson. You've brought in Jonathan McConnon, who is a little bit of a reserve over at Colorado State, and Elijah Ryans really didn't see a lot of run over at Western Michigan, so probably going to need to bring in a little bit more to be able to get things all solidified there. Rutgers has a lot of work in terms of getting things solidified, but hey, I think that this is a step in the right direction. Rashid Jones, he was over at Coastal Carolina last year, shot about 36.5% from three-point range, 15 points, 3 assists per game, steal per contest over at Coastal Carolina. He decides that he's heading on over to Rutgers. He very much fits the Rutgers style. Rutgers is on a defense that's going to generate a lot of turnovers. Typically, they're based around nastiness, they're based around just being able to hit the boards in general, and for Rutgers, it's been a underwhelming offseason. Christian Godric, he comes over from Virginia Tech. He really didn't see a lot of minutes. Doran Buca, they're gambling on him. Luis Duarte, he saw some okay minutes over at New Mexico State. Like, I'm trying to squint and think, oh, is there anything good? Like, Darren Smith Jr. is solid. He comes over from Central Connecticut, but I mean, that's a big leap for him. Will Sidner, he missed all last season over at Manhattan when he was a freshman. He was very rock solid, but it's hard to see Rutgers making a lot of noise out there in the Big Ten, but I certainly do think that this is a step in the right direction, so I like this ad for them, and I like this ad as well. You've got Jacoy Hutchinson. He was over at George Washington 2 seasons ago. Last season, he was over at Longwood, and he was averaging for that team right around about 12 points, stealing out per contest, 3.2 assists per game. Not a guy that's going to light you up from three-point range, but the Troy Trojan system does not really require a lot of three-point shooting, and he's going to be heading on over there. And for Troy, obviously, it's been a tumultuous offseason. You lose Scott Cross, you lose much of that roster, but I think that they're making the most out of it. I don't think that they're going to take a massive fall off out there in the Sun Belt. They're bringing in a lot of the D2 guys, as the main other guy that they bring in is Robert Davis Jr., who he was on himself last season over at Old Dominion. 2 years ago, he's a 15-plus point per game scorer. I think that they're building themselves a nice backcourt. They're going to be lacking a little bit down low, so I want to see how they're going to be able to mix and match with that regard, but I do like this pickup for them. And then I like the fact that Dylan Anderson, who was over at Murray State, he's heading on over to Northern Arizona. We've seen Northern Arizona be a rock-solid program when they've had a dominant rebounder. We saw it with Carson Tout a few seasons ago, and for Anderson, he began his career over at Arizona and Boise State. He really wasn't able to get out there too much for Murray State because he was lost in the shadow of Frederick King last season. He was only averaging about 1.7 rebounds per game, but over in Northern Arizona, he should be able to get a lot of run. For Northern Arizona, 2 years ago, they had themselves a nice year. Last year, it went straight down the toilet bowl. A lot of their top scorers got injured, so there's just not a lot that they could do. And for Northern Arizona, certainly leaving a little bit of something to be desired in terms of adding guys in the transfer portal. I believe that this is their first Division I transfer, but that said, they are a team that does a great job in terms of scouring the junior college ranks. They've got a few freshmen that are going to be coming in, and they've got some retention as well. So I do like this pickup for them. You've got Jacob Patrick. He last season was over at Utah, only played in 10 games. In the 10 games that he played in, 7.5 points per game, shot 46% from three. Very small sample size, though. He has decided that he is going to be going to SMU. For SMU, they've been spending a little bit this offseason, but I feel like they've been passed up with a lot of these teams in the ACC. Like, I think that the bottom of the ACC is going to be very, very jumbled up for this upcoming season. For SMU, they've been able to make some relatively solid moves to be able to avoid that cellar, because we are going to be seeing teams, in my opinion, like Boston College, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, really coming for them. But for SMU, I feel like over the last few weeks, they've been able to stabilize that backcourt. This is going to be a nice, shall we say, insurance ad for them. Guy that can come in off the bench, pop it from three. Rowan Brumba, I have to think, is going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit in this offense. David Terrell is a nice go-to passer. They bring in Jalen Stewart, who didn't see a ton of run over at UConn, but I think that he's got some upside there. They're going to be lacking down low with losing Samat Yedoglu. I always say that last name incorrect, the 7-footer from Turkey who left, but still, I do think that the backcourt is going to be solid, and now they've got some nice three-point shooting here. And then you've got Xavier Thomas. He has decided that he is going to be going to St. Peter's, and he was originally supposed to be going to Lindenwood. He was a Division II player over at Saginaw State, one of the more underrated Division II players. He was shooting about 34.5% from three, 16 points per game. I think that he's going to be a good fit here for the Peacocks. As we know with St. Peter's, they always do a a nice job in terms of playing tough, tenacious defense. I think that they're going to be able to do that once again. I feel like they've been able to do a much better job in terms of adding some offense here in the offseason as well, because for St. Peter's, they maybe aren't looking at like the flashy guys that are going to be putting in there a ton of three-point shooting or anything like that, but they've been able to add a lot of guys that are going to be able to do a nice job hitting the boards. That's what this team is all about. Now they've got a nice go-to scorer to be able to go with it. So do like that ad. Brandon McCreesh, he was over at the bracket busting Bucknell Bison last year, limited 8 games due to injury, and Bucknell was really hurt by injuries in their backcourt, but he was averaging about 7.5 points per game. He has decided that he is going to be going to Incarnate Word, and we have seen a lot of these teams in the Southland spending. Obviously, McNeese has been head and shoulders among them all, but McCreesh is a guy that I like. When he gets some good minutes, he's able to be a really nice three-point shooter. Last year, shot 37.5% from three. He's a career 41.6% three-point shooter, a little bit of a microwave guy, and he fits the Incarnate Word system well. For Incarnate Word, they're going to need to do a little bit of a better job on the glass because last season, they weren't necessarily a great low-post team, to say the least, but that's up for this Incarnate Word team. They are losing quite a bit of guys like Staj Savetsky and company in the backcourt. They've done a nice job in terms of reloading here, because I think that at the very bare bones minimum, you've got a guy here that's able to pop it and lock it from three-point range, be a little bit of a microwave scorer off the bench. And for Incarnate Word, they're also adding in there a guy like Makai Connor, who's able to be that main facilitator coming over from Sacred Heart. Maximo Garcia is a guy that should be able to give you a bit of something coming over from Florida State. Again, not a lot of size down low. Caleb Spencer at 6'8" is your main big man coming over from William & Mary, so that's going to be a little bit difficult for them, but I do think that they've done a pretty exceptional job with regards to this backcourt. You've got Julius Clark. He was over at Gardner-Webb this last season, was averaging for them about 7.5 points per game. He's decided that he's going to be going to North Alabama. For North Alabama, it was just a no good, very bad, terrible season last year after they were very, very close to making the NCAA tournament a few seasons ago. I do have a lot of respect for Tony Poole. He was dealing with a banged up roster. He was dealing with a lot of mix and match in general with Clark. He is a native of the state of Alabama, and he's 6'7", so he's going to be able to give them a little bit of size. When North Alabama has really been hitting their peak, they've been a team that has been able to pop it a little bit from three, and they also do a nice job on glass. I think that he's going to be able to help out a little bit more on glass. They're also going to be bringing in a guy in Jacob Whitted, who is over at Tennessee Tech. I think that he's going to be able to give them versatility at 6'7", and that's really been the name of things for North Alabama. They're probably going to be looking at Quan Lax, who comes over from Ossipee to be a little bit of a, shall we say, quarterback of the defense, give you a little bit of facilitation, but they're looking at guys that are 6'6", 6'7". They're able to space the floor, and they've done a nice job bringing in quite a few of those. Kama Enebauer, he was last season over at New Hampshire. He has decided that he is going to be going to NC State, and this one is going to be very interesting, to say the least, because he has had a very long and winding road for Enebauer. He, last season, was averaging in that neighborhood about 9 points per game. Began his career over at Iona in Central Florida. At Iona, he was about a 4.5 point per game guy. At New Hampshire, he was a sixth man that was able to average about 4.5 rebounds per game. I can't think that he's going to be doing any more than being a practice player. If they're relying upon him for big minutes, then I don't know what Justin Gainey is doing. And we've seen a lot of these ads recently for NC State. Like they added Jakari Brim, who's averaging 2 points per game at Appalachian State. Now, obviously, they've got a nice locked and loaded starting five, like Christian Hammond coming over from Santa Clara. That's very rock solid. They retain Paul McNeil Jr. I wonder what they're going to be doing down low. Kyle Evans is obviously amazing, but you don't really have much size outside of him. Emil Viejo, he's 6'8", but he's a little bit more of a stretch big man, so I mean, there's a little bit of question mark there. Darius Adams is very rock solid, but they've got a great starting five, and then they're relying upon a bunch of dudes. Like, I don't know exactly what Mr. Gainey is thinking here. I think that might be a little bit of a rough year for NC State. I'm not necessarily bullish on the Gainey hire in general, but hey, congratulations to our guy from New Hampshire being able to land that role. And even though it's the offseason here in college basketball, the news just keeps coming. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Good Soups, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, large DM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And a big thanks once again to our guy, Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16. He joined me in the last segment, and I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast. Here in the offseason, we're looking at the news and notes that we are getting in college basketball, and then once we get these rosters a little bit more solidified, I'm going to give you guys a specialized conference preview edition for all 32 conferences. Then once we get in season, picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.